Hi everyone, Linda from Let's Talk Prepping. I want to talk a little bit about the rising cost of food and maybe what you can do about it. This is from shtfplan.com. Severe economic desperation rises rapidly all over America as nearly half the nation cuts back spending on food. And this is by Michael Snyder. I really like him. He writes a whole bunch of good articles. And he says it's starting to look a lot like 2008. Extremely long lines are forming at food banks all over the country. Countless small businesses are right on the brink of going under, a housing crash that could be even worse than what we witnessed in 2008 has begun, and a large number of Americans are moving into sheds in a desperate attempt to save money. The new economic downturn is still only in the very early stages, and yet the economic suffering that we are already seeing all over the country is truly frightening. If people are struggling this much now, what will conditions be like 6 months down the road? If you find yourself cutting back on spending on groceries and gasoline these days, you're not alone. And Suffolk University did a survey and said half the nation is in the same boat. 45.3% of the Americans had to cut back on grocery spending. 59.4% said they're going to eat less as a result of inflation. 48% are driving less. 45.4% said they're postponing or canceling vacations and travel plans due to the cost. And inflation is eviscerating our standard of living. And millions upon millions of Americans are deeply hurting. And this is important, and when people are deeply hurting, they often become desperate. And if things get really bad, you know people are going to be desperate, so you should be prepared now. Make sure you have some way of protecting yourself and anything you have stored. There's been a very alarming rise in shoplifting all over the U.S. And in New York City, things have gotten so bad they started locking up cases of spam. Local pharmacies are also locking up items. And of course, Michael Snyder says, first of all, who in the world would pay $3.99 for a can of Spam? It's absolutely disgusting, and I wouldn't eat it under any circumstances, even if someone gave it to me free. Secondly, why would anyone ever steal a can of Spam when there are many other options that are actually edible? I just don't understand. And according to CNN, a lot of retailers have transformed into fortresses. Most of the drugstore shelves are behind lock and key, and everyday items such as deodorant, toothpaste, candy, dish detergent, soap, and aluminum foil. Manufacturers that supply lock cases and devices to chain stores have seen their businesses boom. And organized retail crime has become really big in the U.S. Rings of criminals that steal products from stores and resell them online. Walgreens and Rite Aid are locking up more of their products, and they're going to close some stores. If this is all, now listen to this now. If this is all taking place while the U.S. economy is at least somewhat relatively stable, what will it be like once we officially plunge into a full-blown economic depression? I really want you to sit back and think about that. Instead of me just reading this to you and say, oh, okay, that's happening, I better think about it. I want you to really think about it. What's going to happen? How prepared are you? Do you have food stored? Do you have a way to protect yourself and your goods? Do you have a place that's fairly secure? If not, what are you going to do to secure your place to get more food? And the other troubling sign he sees is the massive lines we're starting to see at food banks all over the country. And according to Zero Hedge, food banks from coast to coast are reporting record high demand and record low supply. From New York to Wisconsin to Ohio to Missouri to Florida to Arkansas to California and beyond, pantries are running out. On top of that, it's the middle of the summer. The busiest time for food banks and the Salvation Army is during the winter holidays. So think about that. If they're running out of food now, what's going to happen for Thanksgiving and Christmas? And they're saying that food, gas, housing, utilities, etc., are fixed income costs, and when these costs rise, workers must cut costs elsewhere, and charities are usually the first to see the chopping block. And the level of demand at our food banks is only going to increase. At some point, there simply will not be enough food for everyone. I really hope you're getting prepared for the very difficult times that are coming, because there will be a limit to what charitable organizations are able to do for you. And I do know some of my friends seem to think that nothing bad will ever happen, and if it does, the government's going to help them. Well, if the charitable organizations aren't going to be able to, I'm sure the government's not going to be able to either. And this was interesting. Some Americans that are attempting to reduce their expenses by literally moving into a shed. One woman in Texas was interviewed by Newsweek. She really regretted spending all her money on a shed because the living conditions turned out to be not pleasant at all. She spent $2,000 on a shed during the Texas heat wave, and she posted on TikTok herself being red-faced and sweating. She was living in the shed without electricity or running water. But others have found shed life to be quite nice. A mother of 4 named Jessica is actually loving shed life, even though her family uses a composting bathroom. So she talked about the composting bathroom. It's a bucket system. When you use it, you cover it with wood chips each time. After 2 days, whether the bucket is full or not, we dump it into a composting bin in the woods. Then after a couple years, the waste turns into soil. And this is really the first I'm hearing about this. It says, in recent months, housing has become the most unaffordable that it has ever been in the U.S., and so shed life has absolutely exploded in popularity. In fact, #ShedLife is now shared on TikTok more than 22 million times. As the economy continues to deteriorate, more and more Americans will be forced to choose alternative lifestyles in the months ahead. But of course, the elites are going to insist everything is just fine. And if you believe it, the definition of recession on Wikipedia has just changed to reflect the narrative of the Biden administration, and it has been locked to prevent any additional editing. Truth is, most Americans know we're in a recession. But as I noted earlier, what we have been through so far is just the tip of the iceberg. The economic downturn is going to get a lot worse, and that means millions upon millions of Americans will soon become even more desperate. So this again was Michael Snyder, shtfplan.com, and all I can say is you're being forewarned here. You might not believe it's as bad as it is, but why don't you go to a food bank and check it out? See how much food is on the shelves. See if there are lines to get in. You know yourself how much everything's going up in price, from mortgages to rents to food to gas. The electric bills are more than doubling. So please plan ahead. Please plan for all of this. You're being forewarned. So take a minute and plan. Do everything you can to be a survivor, to make it through this time, because this time will end. Maybe in 6 months, maybe in 6 years. We don't know. But if you can plan ahead right now, you might have a chance. So thanks for watching. Please comment and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed.